Well, in the last exercise, you wrote a 15-sentence description and each sentence went in the following order, displaying the following 15 skills. Stage 2 of this process is going to be to learn how to redraft to improve it. So some of your sentences, you'll notice when you read through, work brilliantly, while some others are clumsy and awkward because you were just trying to fit the technique in and it was really hard. So now we're going to go through and get rid of any bits that don't work. You might find that you want to add in extra sentences to link ideas together. You might need some more. The next technique is a really advanced one. I'm going to make sure that your imagery works together as a whole. I'll show you that. And then we'll go back and just see if all our sentences start with a different word and whether we can change the word order to force us to get that right. Now, in order to make this a genuine activity for me so that I'm in your shoes, I asked my son to name me something I had to describe, and he said describe a motorbike, which I've never owned. But luckily for me, I did do an intensive motorbike course about 15 years ago to get a license to ride some of the most powerful motorbikes. So I've decided to focus on a 20-second snapshot of one of those lessons. And the reason, of course, that I'm only going to have 20 seconds is that if it goes longer than that, the examiner might think I'm turning it into a story, into a narrative, and I want this to be a description. However, the other advantage of having 20-second snapshot is that this is the kind of description you would find in a story. And one of the major problems I find in student writing is they end up writing descriptions full of techniques that you would never ever find in a story or a book. In other words, they're not real descriptions. You have to think like a writer who's writing a novel and ask, would this description fit in a novel? Okay, so we have my first sentence, which must start with a verb. Remember when stunt motorcyclists used to hurl themselves off canyons, smashing bones and being pinned back together like cyborgs? So this is simply my earliest memory of motorcyclists. There was a guy called Evel Knievel who used to do incredible stunts on motorbikes, and he was famous for breaking virtually every bone in his body, getting pinned back together again, and I used to watch things like Doctor Who with cyborgs in them. And so I'm just picking references from my childhood. And you would do the same. Obviously, you'd have different references because some of you are a few years younger than I am. Sadly, it all comes back to me on day 3 of my intensive motorcycling course. I've started with an adverb. It makes sense. I'm happy with those. We take the slip road, scything through space and time with impossible acceleration. Well, I'm pretty happy with that. The verb scything really helps me out here, because it also links to this image of death, you know, the Grim Reaper with his scythe, and it's introducing the idea that on this powerful machine I might die, which is going to be what this description is about. And I like the reference to space and time because it's a bit sci-fi, and remember, cyborgs is sci-fi and comes from Doctor Who. So I'm linking my imagery together. That, remember, was a really advanced technique that I was telling you about, but I just allow my mind to make associations, and then that advanced technique becomes actually a very easy technique because all our minds work that way. So it's scything through space and time with impossible acceleration, so much more sudden than a car, and I find myself struggling to think quickly enough as this machine lurches forward. So I needed a show-off sentence, didn't I, that was 25 words long, I think. And I'm highlighting that. That's 35 words long. Very show-off. But actually, I want a bit of drama here, don't I, as the machine takes over. So having a really long sentence doesn't really work. Therefore, I'm going to edit this. So let's start by getting rid of and turning this into a sentence. A further sentence. I find myself struggling to think quickly enough. Well, that's a really long way to say that I'm panicking, really. So I could just write, I begin to panic, or I think a better way, because I like the idea of not being able to think, if I just shorten it to this. The reader spots that change in tone. I've had a long detailed sentence, and then suddenly this short sentence which reflects my panic. I can't think. So I like that. Then obviously I can make this shorter as well, can't I? And so I'm going to have the machine lurches forward. That's good. I like that a lot. Now, you might be tempted to write about it as a beast or something, but that doesn't link with my theme, if you like, which was sci-fi and cyborgs, so machine is more appropriate here. In the car park, it looked squat and fat-bellied, like an old-fashioned prop. Yeah, I really like that. That's a great simile to describe this motorbike. You can imagine its big petrol tank as like a fat belly. So like an old-fashioned prop forward, yet here, in its element, it has become a muscular winger. So rugby imagery works for me. I'm really happy with it. However, it does take me away from my sci-fi sort of imagery. So at this stage, I'm going to highlight it. And as I go through, I'm going to wonder if I can change that to a different set of imagery that fits with the sci-fi. At the minute, I'm not sure. Although I'm accelerating faster than any roadworthy car, this is just a lesson, and I feel the first stomach lurching of fear. Right, I want to get to the idea of fear earlier here. I've had to start the sentence with although because that was my instruction, but I don't have to keep that now that I'm redrafting. And I am accelerating suggests that I'm in control, which obviously I am, but I really want to portray the image that the machine is more in control than I am. So I'm going to go back to my sci-fi imagery. Okay, I've now rewritten that in the way that I'm a bit happier. We hit warp speed before I have time to realise what I have done. I feel the first stomach lurching of fear. Okay, that feels better. However, this always happens when you're trying to improve. You also take a step backwards. So look, I've started sentences with a we and an I, and I've already had an I sentence here and a we sentence here. And that takes me away from my lesson of sentence variety. So let's start with the idea of warp speed, and let's have a better verb. Warp speed kicks in. I like that. I know I'm going to be feeling something because the word lurching, stomach lurching and fear tells me that. So this is actually wasted. Let's change that to my stomach lurches with fear. I want to get the reader through this moment. I want these events to happen really quickly in a short space of time to convey my fear at the speed of the bike. So now I can get rid of that sentence. We've replaced it. Ahead, Andy forgets his mirror. Again, the short sentence really works for me here, but I've got a slightly confused meaning. I mean that he forgets to look in his mirrors and check for oncoming traffic, because in this sentence he's going to move into that oncoming traffic and almost get killed. And so I'll just have forgets his check, his mirror check. Time slows as his machine joins the carriageway. Yeah, I'm really happy with this because the time idea works with the warp speed, works with the sci-fi. Inches in front of a speeding saloon, like a movie monster, bloodied teeth slashing a fingertip behind the hero. I'm still in sci-fi. It isn't space sci-fi, but I've still got that sci-fi image going, which I'm quite happy about. The scene I'm actually picturing here is in Jurassic Park when they're being chased by the dinosaur and they're in a jeep, I think. Now, the reason I don't mention Jurassic Park here is obviously my readers might never have seen the film, and in another 10 years it's very unlikely that they've seen the film, but they will all have seen movies with monsters in them with really dangerous teeth chasing a victim or a hero. Perhaps that's when I know I'll never buy a bike of my own immersed in this river of speed. So now I've got a different set of imagery here about being underwater. So that doesn't quite fit my sci-fi theme, and it also doesn't fit with my rugby theme. So although I love it on its own, it might not fit my writing overall. Cars kiss the air as they clatter by, engines a cacophony of pistons, rubber rattling the tarmac. Yeah, I really like this. Forcing myself to use these C's and T's has really created a dramatic sound. I think that was a really cool addition. I'm going to keep it just as it is. The traffic has an undertow, and the motorbike and I must speed along it, fearful of drowning, waiting for a slowing of the current when we can sweep across its side. Yeah, okay, I really like this. So, you've heard about people going out for a swim and suddenly the undertow in the sea catches them by surprise and they're forced out into sea and drown. And I think that imagery works brilliantly with the idea that I don't want to go into this stream of heavy traffic. Now, although this isn't sci-fi imagery, I'm keeping it because it fits with the idea of being immersed in water. So now my imagery is linking together. Surely a sign will signal left, and the sea of cars will part and shoot me gratefully out to spin me away from danger. So you can see I've managed to keep the water idea and the sea going, so this is actually working quite well. I'm keeping it in. But no, the machine's hot throbbing is still sending vibrations through my wrists, my palms receiving the juddering signals like Morse code, SOS, SOS on repeat. Now this works for me because my hands get quite a lot of pummeling up and down, up and down, up and down, and this reminds me of the dot dash dot dash dot dash dot dash of Morse code. And it leads, of course, to the most famous Morse code. This is what you send when you want to be rescued. Save our souls, SOS. The silver speedometer winks at me, wheels spinning beneath me at 70 miles an hour, and just a coat to stop my limbs being ripped off by cars or tarmac should we slip. Yeah, this works for me. The idea of limbs being ripped off fits with that dinosaur image chasing me, that movie monster. I've personified the speedometer as having a little sly wink and taunting me with what it's doing. However, I did describe the motorbike as being like a person earlier, remember? At first the fat-bellied old prop and then became a muscular winger. So I want to come back to the rugby idea to link this imagery together. So now I've extended the rugby reference. The silver speedometer winks at me as the bike hugs the lanes like touchlines. This works. The winger is desperate to stay inside the touchlines so they don't go out of bounds. And that's exactly the same for me on my motorbike. I don't want to go across the white line because that will drag me into a different lane with faster traffic. Now that I've done that though, my colon no longer works as an explanation. How is this a legal pursuit? I could have written pastime, but remember I'm being chased here in that movie monster image, so the double meaning of pursuit, as in something that you follow or something following you, works well for me here. I'm going to keep that in. And then finally, I steel myself, pinning each fear down with Allen keys and bolts, so that my fear won't show beneath my helmet, and my cyborg head will lift up at home in a careering universe. This is why I put this technique last of referring something back to the beginning, because it's a really easy way to give your writing a satisfying structure. So obviously I've picked the cyborg head again, which is actually the helmet, and I've picked on the idea of a careering universe, this idea of bodies in space hurling around at massive speeds, to fit my sci-fi description of the traffic from earlier. The last check on my list is to look at the beginnings of each sentence and see if I have started with different words. So I've highlighted all of those in green, and I know that my problem words are likely to be we, I, and the, because they're simply very, very common in any writing. So as I scan through, I'm going down. Oh, look, I've got 2 more the's and 1 more I. Now that's still a lot of sentence variety, because remember I've introduced more sentences by splitting things up. But I'm just going to double check. The machine lurches forward. There isn't an easy way to get rid of that the. I'm going to keep it. The traffic has an undertow. Having the suggests that it's only at this moment as I'm learning to ride the motorbike that the traffic is this dangerous. If I get rid of the word the and just start with traffic, that suggests that the traffic is always this dangerous. So this is an occasion where getting rid of the actually works. The silver speedometer winks at me. I can't see an easy way to get rid of the. I can't really start the sentence with a different word. Normally I'll try and move the verb over here, but then the sentence won't make sense. So I'm going to keep it. Now the important thing for you to realise is that my first draft was already really good. Well, it should be. I'm a teacher, aren't I? So it was already a grade 9. but I still have to do all the same checks that you need to do. Now, it would be an interesting question for you to decide which of these 4 made the most impact on improving my writing, because that's probably the one that's going to make most impact in improving yours. Now, obviously, the really high grade skill was that one, but this is a skill that will be mastered by very few 16-year-olds. Don't expect to get that straight away. The other really important skill for me was going through and looking at sentences that I'd written that were great sentences on their own, but I thought actually if I split these up and make them a bit more dramatic by introducing the short sentence drama and that change of pace, I think that was really successful and something that you would be able to do quite easily. Now that you've redrafted your work, send it in.